Hello.
Hello.
Thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the library for co-sponsoring this presentation. This month's hot topic is on the pros and cons of tax abatements, and I have to say I find this subject rather confusing. I know I read a lot about it in the paper and just don't know enough about what it means to make any kind of to form any good opinion. So we're going to have three speakers here, and hopefully by the time we leave, we'll all have a better idea of both what tax abatements are and what you think about them. Our first speaker is City Attorney Tony Wheeler. And Tony's going to just start with some definitions and explanations to give us an idea of what the topic means, and then we'll move on from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I get started, I wanted to just say a thank you to the League of Women Voters. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to address this group, but I'm very familiar with your group. In my work as a city attorney, I attend all of the meetings of the City Commission, and oftentimes we get very, very well thought out, well drafted position papers from the League of Women Voters on topics that are pending before the City Commission. And I want to tell you that your comments are very helpful. I think they are very helpful to our elected officials, and I appreciate the thought and the work that you put into them. I also want to just thank you generally for your interest in local government. I'm so pleased that so many people are in attendance today, and I think that the work that you do is very, very important. So I just wanted to start out with that. As the person said that introduced me, I am just supposed to give sort of an overview of what a tax abatement is. And I provided in the back of the room, there's a handout. It's an excerpt from the Kansas Constitution that defines a tax abatement. This amendment to the Kansas Constitution was approved by the voters back in 1986. Article 11, Section 13 of the Kansas Constitution provides discretionary powers to cities and counties to abate property taxes for up to 10 years for real and personal property of certain businesses that I'll discuss later. Local elected governing bodies of a city or county determine whether to grant an abatement for eligible property. The purpose of this constitutional amendment, according to the League of Kansas Municipalities, is to encourage local economic development and to improve the Kansas economy on a long-term basis. I just want to summarize the amendment for you. It says that Kansas counties and cities may exempt property from ad valorem taxation. They can exempt ad valorem taxation all or any portion of the appraised valuation of buildings, land, and tangible personal property used exclusively by a new business for manufacturing, research and development, or the storing of goods traded in interstate commerce. So those three types of businesses, new businesses, are eligible for a tax abatement. The amendment goes on to say that an exemption may also be granted for existing buildings or new expansions to existing buildings, and for the land and associated new property for the same purposes to facilitate the expansion of the business if new employment is created. All right, so it's available for a new business if the new business is engaged in manufacturing, research and development, or the storing of goods traded in interstate commerce. And it's available for existing businesses if new employment is created by the expansion. And this exemption may extend to up to 10 years. In 1990, the Kansas legislature established specific procedures that cities and counties must follow before granting a constitutional property tax exemption. First, they have to adopt official uniform policies and procedures, and those policies and procedures must require a cost-benefit analysis. They must include a procedure for monitoring compliance of the businesses who are granted an exemption based on the conditions or terms that are established by the governing body. The policy must require that the governing body conduct a public hearing on the proposed exemption, and then cities and counties must adopt a resolution before granting an exemption, making certain findings of fact, and one of the critical findings is that the property will be used exclusively for one of the purposes that are set out in the Constitution. After the public hearing is held, and other consideration, and the governing body determines that the exemption is in the public interest, then it must pass an ordinance approving the applicant's property for exemption. The exemption begins the calendar year after the business begins operations or the year the business expansion is completed. And the applicant then has to follow up with the Board of Tax Appeals and the county appraiser to finalize that tax abatement. The City of Lawrence has a special code provisions that sets out our policy on them, and we have certain additional requirements for tax abatements granted by the City of Lawrence. We grant them if the business is environmentally sound, and if they meet certain capital investment, job creation, wages, and health benefits that are stipulated in our agreement. Again, we require the cost to benefit analysis that the statute requires, and they're subject to an annual accounting or review during the time that they are receiving the tax abatement. So that is sort of an overview of the tax abatement process, and now I'll turn it over for the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Larry McElwain. He's been president and CEO of the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce since June of 2014, I believe. He's also the president of the Economic Development Corporation of Lawrence, Douglas County. And his specific area of interest or focus includes economic development through retention and expansion of existing business base, entrepreneurial development, attraction of new business to Lawrence, and employment growth.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting Alan and me to be here today to talk with you about this subject. I've been around the community a long, long time. I wasn't born here, but I've spent most of my life here. But I have followed the League of Women Voters and what you all do in the community and for Douglas County for a long time. So I think it's good that we come together to talk about these subjects. We may not agree on everything. Alan and I don't agree on everything, but we have a lot of things that we agree upon. He's got 4 daughters. I have 4 daughters. You know, there's just a lot. There's a lot of things that Alan and I can't agree on, and even beyond 4 daughters. So, but anyway, I thank you very much for this opportunity to be here. A little bit of background in that before I took the position at the Chamber of Lawrence, I was in business here for 43 years. So I've been on the private side, and I have been in a situation where I had different opinions about abatements. I can't say that I'm an expert on it even yet, but I am learning. I love the process of learning that goes on every day. But I see a little bit different side of it from where I am now, or where I was for 43 years. I know as a person in business for 43 years, I would not have looked forward to my competition, which was fierce competition in the industry, of getting any kind of an incentive that gave their business an advantage over mine. I'm looking for fairness then. I'm looking for fairness now. That hasn't changed. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I think are important. I think that community, first of all, I look at tax abatement as a tool. It's not a rule. It's not something that rules my life or the life of the chamber or the life of City Hall or county courthouse. It's a tool. And I think it's a tool that can be used effectively, but I think it needs to be used carefully. I think one of the reasons that things work pretty well from what my viewpoint in Douglas County is that we have procedures. We have a process. I mean, you all know like I do, that this is a process community. You don't just drop in a helicopter and take off running. You got a process to go through. I think the process that we have here is effective in that it goes through a public incentive review committee. It goes to the city commission. It's looked at. It's carefully looked at, and not something that, and there are metrics that it has to meet. So again, we can have tax abatements of up to 100%. I've only heard of 70% in recent years. I think it's probably pretty clear to say right now that 50% is kind of the threshold. If a tax abatement is going to be used, it may not be any more than 50%. Another tool that we have is industrial revenue bonds for giving sales tax on construction materials. I think the most recent example of that occurred over at the Eldridge for their expansion. That was a debated issue, and they did receive the industrial revenue bonds, but it was a 3-2 vote to get that. So again, I think it's part of the, quote, process in Lawrence that makes us careful about what we do. There's the tax increment financing, TIF, which rebates incremental increases in property tax over a defined period of time. Workforce development grants. I think that's going to come more into play in every project because we do have workforce training now in the Peasley Center and the College and Career Center that we didn't have ever before. That's probably one of the most exciting tools. I talk about tools in economic development. The Peasley Tech and the College and Career Center cannot be underestimated in value of helping us to recruit businesses. And not only recruit businesses, but to increase the ability of the businesses that are already inside of Lawrence to grow and to prosper. Lawrence has all of these tools. They are designed to incentivize developers and companies to bring projects and locate in our community. They act as an investment in the future benefit of the community, and they demonstrate to the community investment in companies that will provide return on investment that we can all tangibly measure. Lawrence and Douglas County, because of its size, location, and amenities, compete with the major metros and the metropolitan statistical areas in Kansas. Lawrence is a metropolitan statistical area of its own, where the others are kind of combined geographic areas. We are a great location. We do have a university and tech training now that can be a workforce generator. We have KU, Baker, Haskell Indian Nations University. So we have some amenities, but they are amenities. They're not totally drivers for economic development. We have great transportation infrastructure. I think that will be one of the growing areas in economic development for our area is the fact that we are close to 59, 75, I-70, I-35, I-435, I-29, 71, you name it, 69. I think that will, and we got the intermodal set down at Gardner, which I think is about 26 miles from Lawrence Venture Park. I think with the completion of the South Lawrence Traffic Way, it will cause this area to explode from an economic development point of view. Why do I bring that up? It's because I think that will focus more on what we're doing in the way of incentivizing these companies to come here. But an important thing that needs to be noted, I think one of the biggest criticisms of the chamber when I came in was the fact that we were spending a lot of our time and a lot of our resources on seeking outside firms to come to Lawrence. That's important, but it's only part of the program. So one of the things that we did that changed things, and there are copies of this economic development plan back on the table back there, along with the City of Lawrence economic development goals and procedures. If you look at this pyramid of our economic development plan for Douglas County, Lawrence and Douglas County, we have taken the focus off of attraction, not totally off, but we have reduced it somewhat because it's a high expenditure. It's a very difficult thing to bring companies in. You really have to work. We're working on a project that we hope will be announced soon that we've been working on for 22 months. It's significant. It's the most significant thing that's occurred in Douglas County in over a decade, but we're 22 months in the development of this company coming here. So it takes a lot of time. We think it's more important, and we've changed our priorities to match up with that we now look at the fact that we're going to help the companies that are here to grow and to prosper, to add employees, to expand if they wish to. We're not going to tell them they need to, but if they tell us they want to and need to, then we're going to do everything we can to help them. One of the things that we're doing to try to bolster that effort is to meet and go visit these companies on a regular basis. Well, I think we've been to Hallmark Cards 3 times. We've been to the pet food companies. We've been to Reuter, Oregon. We've been to Allen Press. We've been out to Intramatic or Amar Garage Door Group. We've been to IT, I think it's GDIT, General Dynamics Information Technology, which is a large employer. And by the way, they're in the process of increasing their employment, hopefully by the first of the year, by 2,000 employees. And they're in the process of recruiting those people right now. So those are things that we're trying to do. Are we incentivizing those with public funds? Some of them have been already, but the companies, the successes that we've had during this year are not incentivized by public monies. And I'm talking about 2 companies, important international companies to the Bioscience Technology Business Center, the BTBC up on the KU campus. Those 2 companies, which is Integrated Animal Health and Stason Pharmaceuticals, have great upside potential to possibly have manufacturing of animal health drugs in this town. Yes, Lawrence has become a center for animal health. I don't talk too much about it outside this room, and neither the BTBC people, but there's more animal health companies located now in Douglas County than in Manhattan and Topeka combined. And a lot of that is the magnet of KU and their School of Engineering and their School of Pharmacy, which are highly rated schools. So anyway, animal health, that's great. And again, those are incentivized to a certain degree by the BTBC, but not heavily. We have a call center, USA 800 in North Lawrence. It's 300 employees, and they're in the process of hiring up to 300. I think the last I heard they needed 100 more employees to get to that threshold that they want to be at. Again, they're not incentivized to be here either with public money. We do have the ability to attract. There's been a huge deal flow over the last year coming through the Kansas City Area Development Council and the Kansas Department of Commerce in Topeka. We've been the beneficiaries of that information and talking to those companies, filling out RFPs, showing them what our assets are here in Douglas County. And I think we're going to be successful with that. Kansas City Area Development Council was voted in 2014 as the top economic development driver company in the United States. That was last year. Their 2 lead people in that company were top 50 economic developers in the country. The Kansas Department of Commerce is effective in drawing businesses to Kansas, so I think they have helped us to a great degree. But anyway, those are kind of the things. 2015 has been a great year, but public incentives have not been a major part of that yet. We do have the ability to use the tax abatement program, the other things I mentioned, the TIF, the industrial revenue bonds, IRBs, and things that we can use, but pretty limited how much we're having to use those things, bringing in what we call primary jobs, which are new jobs that take money from the outside and bring them, and the money comes in from the outside, and it's not money that's churned inside our area. But again, our major focus of the chamber is not on recruiting these outside companies. We don't turn away opportunities. We fill out RFPs. We do everything we can to get our information out to them, but our major focus has turned to companies that are already inside Lawrence and how we can help them grow. Most of the statistics that we find say that 85% of job creation occurs with existing businesses. We think that's something worth, hooking our train to, because we've got great businesses that are already here. Let's help them grow. An example of a company that was incentivized with tax credits is Plasticon, Bonnie, help me. Boyer's company. Build Smart, but Proseco. Proseco was a company that was, and that's Bonnie Lowe, who's the COO and my right and left arm at the chamber. But Bonnie and I worked together on economic development. But anyway, the Boyer family brought their company here in the late 80s. Again, it's Proseco. It's grown tremendously. It was incentivized. They've lived through their, I think they're just about done with their tax incentives. But now they are starting a new division of their country called Build Smart. And the incentive that they received was the forgiveness of some specials on some land that's being donated to them by the county adjacent to their East Hills Business Park. This lot is not really helpful for anybody else. There's a huge amount of dirt work that's going to have to occur to make it workable. But the fact is the city stepped up and forgave the specials that accumulated on that land, and the county has donated that land to them. So that's using public incentive, but it's a going business and it's a growing business. But they're going to be building panels out there that will be used for pre-cut homes that are very energy efficient. It's a whole process of building and assembling that will occur out there. So again, I look both ways on tax abatements. I understand the criticisms. I mean, you can go out to the internet and you can find many more criticisms of tax abatements than you can find success stories. One of the things that we rely on quite a bit, and I did bring this back there to you. This is the 2014 economic development kind of report card that's created inside of City Hall. Some of the statistics that are worth noting in here is that all of the right now there are the companies in Lawrence that are receiving tax abatements are all being successful. They're all meeting the performance agreements that they're having to sign with the city before they're abated, and they're above what the thresholds were for tax generation. They're above, what as far as employment numbers, wages, all of those things, they're in excess of what the performance agreements that they were required by the city at the time. So I am sure there are arguments, I know there are arguments against tax abatements, but it's been a useful tool. I look at the 5 companies that are abated right now, and I wouldn't want any of those to go somewhere else. They're all viable. They're playing an important part in the job mix for our people, giving opportunities. And again, I think we'll continue as a tool, but fortunately we've got a process that I think adequately protects the taxpayer from overspending or giving money to companies that are too risky. I think we're in a good place with the process. If the city commission at any time decides they want to change the rules, the thresholds, the cost-benefit ratio, et cetera, they can do that. Until then, we'll play by the rules, and the city does the same thing. They give us good advice. If they see a company that they don't like, that's maybe not providing the information that they need to provide, they tell us. And we have recently put on hold a company because we did not have them complying with the information that we needed to make a good decision. If you can't make a good decision, you don't make it. And you also know going in that every deal is not a good deal, but we've got to make sure that the deals we make are things that we don't have to pay for later. So with that, I will turn it over to my good friend Alan, and again, I'll try to answer any questions that you have afterwards. I'm on a learning curve. I've been at it 18 months. I love what I'm doing. I love working with City Hall and the commissioners and just the things that we're doing together. But I am on a learning curve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oops, I guess I didn't. Not very used to using these things. Thank you. Our next speaker is Alan Ford. Alan is the Larry D. Homer KPMG Professor of Tax Accounting at the School of Business at the University of Kansas, which is rather a long introduction. He teaches courses, what it comes down to, he teaches courses in taxation. And his areas of interest include taxation, individual corporate partnership, estate tax, gift tax. He's interested in tax incentives for economic development and tax policy. So, Alan, please. And he's handed out some information for you.
Thank you, Janice, very much. I do applaud the League of Women Voters for taking on such a complicated topic, especially like during the lunch hour. We're having some trouble hearing me here, so is my mic working? What do you think? Is my mic working? No. I'll take yours. I'm okay. All right. Well, I was asked to be on the con side of the tax abatement argument, which is really isn't very hard for me to do. I've been doing that for quite a while. The complexity of the topic caused me to give a handout for you, so maybe it'll help you in keeping up with me a little bit. And starting off thinking a little bit about why I would argue against tax abatement. The first argument that you would make, and I think Larry kind of alluded to it, and I really enjoyed Larry's comments. I thought he made some very appropriate comments here. It just lacks fairness. It's a very unfair situation to be subsidizing one business at the expense of other businesses. You know, my ideal tax policy would be one that's clearly a fair tax policy. But, you know, fairness just doesn't get anywhere in this argument. It just doesn't go anywhere, so it's not much use to sit back and argue too hard on it. I don't think it's a good economic development tool, and we often subsidize somebody for doing something that they're going to do anyway, and you're really wasting the subsidy amount here. In fact, I really like Charles Koch of Koch Industries. Many of you know Koch Industries very well, and some of you probably don't think very highly of it, but I really like his position. He is steadfastly opposed to tax subsidies, but yet he'll stand in line and say, I'll take them. And he takes them, but yet he's steadfastly opposed. I went to a seminar recently where someone from that firm was talking. They were talking about investments, and they were talking about what they looked like, what they had to have a return in. And he said, we never consider subsidies. It's never part of our decision. And after the presentation, I went up and talked to him. I said, now I want to just check you out on this now. I've heard this all the time from Koch Industries, that you don't pay any attention to subsidies. He said, absolutely not. We don't consider it. If they give it to it, that's just gravy. We just go ahead and take it and smile and go our way. We don't think it's a good idea. I was on the board for a company on the New York Stock Exchange. Their management felt the same way. They really didn't put any emphasis on those subsidy programs. So often I think we're wasting that amount of subsidy. Now you're supposed to use something called the but-for principle. You don't give the subsidy if it doesn't affect your decision. And so if we're looking for a company who's thinking about coming into Lawrence, and the idea, and this was the reason it got passed in the Constitution, was to say, okay, we want you to have that tool. If you really believe that we need to use this subsidy to attract the company, do it. Well, what do? We have given, when people come in and ask, we've always given the subsidy. We just simply have ignored the but-for principle. It has no bearing on our decision. Locally, in order to get somebody to say, if I want to put in a building here or a hotel or whatever it is, you have to convince them that you can't do it unless you get the subsidy. When I'm an accountant, I can put together any kind of numbers you want to show you my position. And frankly, many times it's based upon assumptions that are quite debatable. Honest people can differ on those assumptions. You start telling me that you're going to put in a hotel and you're going to have a 55% occupancy rate, and I look around the rest of the country, they're having a 70% occupancy rate, I'm going to question what you're doing, but it's going to be pretty hard for me to challenge you in terms of what you're actually going to have as an occupancy rate here. There are a number of potential parties to a tax abatement situation. And so let me just talk off, I list there here. I've got 4 different parties on my handout, you can see. ABC Company is seeking the tax abatement. We've got the federal government, we've got the state government, and then we've got the entity or the person who owns the land that might be used for our new building site. And so to try to keep, I know it's kind of hard to use numbers, but let me try to use a number like $100,000. Kind of an even number to think about. And our abatements are talking about a lot more than $100,000, but just using that number of $100,000 and think about that number. Well, if we're going to give a company property tax relief of $100,000, how much are we really giving them? Well, we're not giving them $100,000. When they pay their property taxes, they'll get a tax deduction. And so they'll lower their tax bill. It's the same principle as some of you, when you give money to the church, you don't really give the total amount that you're giving. When you take your tax deduction, it reduces the cost of the gift. So if you have $100,000 of property taxes, and we say, ABC, you don't have to pay the $100,000. Well, their federal tax bill may go up $35,000. How well are we? We're off, what, $65,000 now in this case? That's all the benefit they're going to get? Now, the rate may be somewhere between 30 and 40%. Same principle at the state level. You got the same idea. But the state will end up getting some of the subsidy. Remember, the federal government's getting a big part of the subsidy. Now I ask you, you own the land that ABC is going to buy. And you know that ABC is going to get this $100,000 tax subsidy, right? You got the picture. What do you do to the price of your land? You're going to want some of that $100,000 too, aren't you? And chances are pretty good you're going to get a little bit of $100,000. So it's not outlandish to say that Lawrence gives up a dollar to benefit ABC by 60 cents. That's not a good business transaction. That's not an effective economic development policy to do. I would applaud more of what Larry talked about, the gift of the land that we just made. That makes a lot more sense than giving property tax abatement. What we're doing is we're converting our business community to subsidy seekers. Before I got involved in this issue, and it goes back to the 80s, I spent time going around and talking to various business people in the community and just trying to get a better understanding. I talked to the economic development people, the chamber people, people at the university, trying to get a better feel for what's going on. And I talked to somebody in Lawrence who hated tax abatements. He thought they were the Scrooge. It was terrible. I talked to somebody in Olathe. He hated the tax abatements. And he made a great argument, fantastic argument. He says, you know, if the education system goes down here, if we can't support our education systems, and my people can't read, and OSHA comes in and pays me a visit, and my guy can't read what's on this list here, safety, I got a big problem. I can't afford to have it. Both of those individuals now have participated in getting tax abatement. We have converted them. We have businesses in Lawrence who never got a subsidy for decades have now come and gone to the subsidy program. I'm so appreciative of Hallmark. You know, Hallmark's been in our community for so many years. They could be taking us to the cleaners if they wanted subsidies, and they don't act. They don't ask for it. We're very beneficial to have that kind of a business in our community to do that. Subsidy program is really difficult to administer. We don't really follow our rules many times when we're doing it. It's hard to decide who's going to get the subsidy, and so that's a tough thing to do. Sometimes you talk about what they call a clawback provision. And what a clawback provision says is, all right, you've promised 30 jobs, and we give you the subsidy, but if you don't deliver the 30 jobs, we're going to take some of that subsidy back from you. Well, that sounds pretty good in theory, right? Well, we look around, 3 years later, she's only got 10 jobs. So we're now saying, oh, we're going to take the subsidy away from you here. And she says, well, you know, it's been a real tough economy. Things have really gone bad for us this time, really hurting. We really need that subsidy. Who's going to take that away? You're not going to do that. That would be heartless. You get all kinds of abuse to doing something like that. So the clawback sounds pretty good. They're very, very infrequently used and administered in that case. The tax subsidy program just seems to keep growing. And I'll show you a few numbers here, and you can kind of decide for yourself how that's going to be going, if that's going to be our case here. And once these abatements are in place, I think we're communities at a real big disadvantage. It's almost, can we even stop? If we just said, okay, we don't want to do subsidies anymore, we're going to stop doing subsidies, can we get away with that? I think that's going to be pretty hard, because in some ways, it's become a little bit of an entitlement program. The business community kind of expects it. And so if you decided to take away, if someone applied for tax abatement next month and the city commission says no, man, you can imagine all of the people saying Lawrence is so anti-business. What's Lawrence got against business? Do they want business to come to our community here? They refuse to give this subsidy. Many people say, you're not pro-business if you don't participate in the subsidy programs. I'm a professor, and I typically give quizzes. And so you're no exception. I'm going to give you a quiz. I want you to tell me what the Wall Street Journal's position would be on tax abatement. How many of you think the Wall Street Journal would favor tax abatement? Let's see a show of your hands now. We'll get a little exercise here. Do you think the Wall Street Journal would favor granting tax abatement? Well, we only have about 3 or 4 or 5 votes, 6 votes, 7, 8. We're picking them up now, 9, 10. That's just like my class. You wait around to see who's voting before you vote. Okay. Well, how many of you would say, well, no, the Wall Street Journal would be opposed to tax abatement here? Okay, some of you read the Wall Street Journal. you know that they're 100% opposed to tax abatements. They're very much opposed to that subsidy. Interfering with the marketplace is what they're concerned about. Well, and let's play one more scenario here for a moment. A company comes to Lawrence. I'm going to be a company. I'm coming to Lawrence, okay? I'm thinking about coming to Lawrence. I've got 100 good jobs. I'm thinking about considering. I go to the city commission, want a subsidy. And the city commission looks at me and they say, you're coming anyway. We don't need to give you the subsidy. You've got 4 grandchildren here in Lawrence. You love the Jayhawks. You really like KU. You taught here for a number of years. You're coming. And they say, no, you can't have it. You don't get it. And I do come. I do come. Is anyone going to go around and talk to those city commissioners and say, hey, you guys did a great job. You called Ford's bluff. You know, you got this 100 nice good jobs here without giving a subsidy. You 5 are great. You're great. Now, you're all going to say, we knew it. He was coming. They didn't do anything special. But they turned me down, and I didn't come. I didn't come. Their political career is dead. They're over. They'll take all kinds of abuse and blame. So it seems to me kind of once we get in these programs, we're kind of locked into them, it looks like. It's going to be really hard to get it straight. I tend to agree with what Larry's saying. I think working internally is really the better way to do it, more effective. Well, what are some arguments for tax abatement? Well, the first one, the obvious one, is all other communities are doing it. Everybody's doing it, okay? You know, we both have 4 daughters. We've heard that argument before quite a few times, I suspect, okay? And when I first got involved in this process, that was not the case. There were many communities not giving tax abatement. Lawrence was very aggressive. Lawrence converted some communities to giving tax abatement. We've been a very aggressive party in this particular situation here. Boy, today, though, it's hard for me to argue against this because it is so common. It's going all over the country, so it's a very, very common phenomenon here. As one economic development person I talked to, and this guy actually works with trying to get subsidies for companies. For some reason, when you're a professor, like from the University of Kansas, and you call and talk to people, they're maybe 1,000 miles away. I've just been amazed at how open they are and how willing they are to talk to me. And this guy, this is his business now. This is what he's doing. He says it's like communities are kind of on a race to the gutter. That's what they seem to be doing. And you kind of shake your head and think about it. You know, that's your business. That's what you're doing. But he kind of lets down and said, that's what I'm seeing. And in some respects, that could be the case. I have no concern about Lawrence getting together. I think Lawrence has so many advantages here. We've got such a great thing. If I was going to sell a community, Lawrence would be my choice. I'd be happy to try to sell Lawrence, Kansas here a little bit. There's no cost to granting tax abatements. Now that to my mind is mind-boggling. But I have actually heard city commissioners make that statement, that we're not incurring any cost. Not very many, but I've heard that statement. They simply don't understand that. And I would say tax abatement is more favorably inclined in Lawrenceville. There's really good support. If you go back and look over for many decades, we've been pretty aggressive and we got support. And you got good people who've been on the board, intelligent people, and they think it's the right thing to do. So there's clearly some real support for it. But this one does mind-boggling. A lot of people say if you don't spend cash, you're not spending money. Well, they asked me to give some examples of some abatements there, and so the second page kind of starts you off on those examples. And the first one real quickly here is the residential rental property that's near the football stadium that's going to go in, that they're getting, 85% for 10 years. And we're talking about a residential rental complex. How many people in Lawrence, Kansas do we have building rental property who are not getting subsidy? If you want to get a poster child for lack of fairness, this one stands right at the top. It also includes some retail as well as residential property. So that's a really discouraging one. Then we've expanded the Eldridge, and I've noticed what you show here, 95% for 15 years. 15 years is a fairly long period of time there. For 95% that you're going to give up with regard to your tax abatement. The city, the county, and the school district are all weighing in on this one. Now the school district there, they thought this issue was so important that they put it on their consent agenda. It wasn't important enough to talk about itself. Now tell me what's more important when you think about economic development than education. That should be at the very top of our list. If there's any group concerned about a lack of governmental funds, you would think it would be the school board, the school district in that case. Now I mentioned here this subsidy is a result of a Neighborhood Revitalization Act, because what I've kind of done here is run a number of programs together. You've got tax abatement, Larry mentioned TIF, and then we've got this Neighborhood Revitalization Act. So we have 3 different programs going on today that kind of come under the heading of subsidy type programs. But tax abatement's where we got started. That's the one that got things rolling, and now, as I mentioned on the first page, it's just going to expand. It's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And I think the numbers that you're seeing right here might show you that. And you know, this Neighborhood Revitalization Act, we said it won't be more than 50%, and it won't be for more than 10 years. And I've put an excerpt there from an article in the paper that Chad Lawhorn wrote, and you can see that, well, we haven't stayed with that at all. We've gone beyond that and good. I also have a little part of a letter to the editor that I wrote in 2015, kind of showing what's happening to these amounts. Back in 1989, we were given tax abatements, and what I would do is I'd say, okay, how many jobs are we getting? And take the subsidy and divide that by the number of jobs we were getting. And you can see there it was, 9,000 plus, and the other one was about $7,500. And both of those companies, by the way, are no longer in Lawrence. We don't have them anymore with us. Recently, we gave a tax abatement that amounted to more than $1 million per job. That's not a typo. That's the real number, more than $1 million per job. So, in fact, if you look at the developers here, and by the way, I made at the point, I'm not critical of any developers. That's not my criticism at all. It's the policy that I would criticize. But I would assume that the developers are paying no real property taxes. They're paying no personal property taxes, but that's true of all businesses. Kansas changed our law. We made it more attractive by taking away the personal property tax on business equipment. And that was a good move. That helped all businesses, not selected business. That makes sense to do something of that nature. That was a very pro-economic development rule, but I could see no change in the behavior of the subsidy seekers and those who were granting the subsidy. It didn't seem to resonate that we made that particular change. You know, one time we used to actually have a tax on inventory. We would tax your inventory. We've done away with that one too. So we've made some changes here in this case. For this one, no real property, no personal property, no sales tax on construction, he mentioned. I am guessing that this company is probably a flow-through company, and they're paying no state income tax on that with regard to the income for that, what is rental property in that case. The Orient end is so complicated that I don't think I can get into that one for you. I gave you a few things there that you can think about a little bit. When you go and buy something at the Orient and a big part of the sales tax you pay, it goes to the developers. The developers built condos at the top of the Orient, and they sold those condos. And it's a great business plan, very good business plan. But the owners of those condos are paying property taxes that effectively go back to the developers. They're not coming back to the community here. And this is going to last for about 20 years. So we're probably talking, if I remember right, somewhere in the neighborhood of about $17 million of subsidies in this particular package, in this one. I actually, if you want to get into that, a couple of professors at KU and myself, we wrote an article explaining it, trying to go back in and deal with the idea of, okay, what is their real rate of return they're going to make on this project? It's kind of a tough article, but if you want a copy, I'll certainly send it to you. The last thing, and I think I'm probably running out of time, is what I would call a really, really bad tax abatement decision. I was very reluctant to even put this one on the table. I wish this one could somehow just disappear. It is the smallest that we've ever given. The money is trivial, it's peanuts. But what we've done, and I'll lay it out to you on the third page, that you can walk through the handout there. If you compare with our policy of what we want to have for a tax abatement decision, and you compare with what was offered and what the promise was, you'll see that we are way off. We're not even close to saying what we wanted, what is supposed to happen. And this is, in my opinion, the very first time that the applicant was ever able to get away with doing something. Normally when somebody applies for abatement, they'll talk about the number of jobs that they expect to create within the next year or two. Now, you may expect to create 20 initially, but you also expect that you will grow. You might hope to grow to 100, and that would be our wish. That's exactly what we want to happen, and that's kind of the original idea of tax abatement. We help you get started, and then you grow, and then you start to pay 100% of the tax burden. And that's the ideal world. That one doesn't seem to exist anymore in this case. But the situation here in this case, they're promising us 40 jobs in total, but we only have about 5 jobs, and they're adding 1 more job. And yet people were saying, hey, we're getting 40 jobs in this deal. Well, anybody can say we're going to get 100 jobs, but delivering something different. So this is the first time that we did this. It's the second time we did something else. We had a building that's on the roads, on the tax rolls, getting 100% tax profit, paying. We're collecting 100% on this building, okay? They took off half of that building. They took it away. Now, an argument that tax abatement proponents would frequently say is, well, wait, if we go out and this business builds a new building, we'll get half of it, and we weren't getting anything if they didn't build a new building. So we're better off, aren't we? I don't think many private businesses run their business that way, but that's the argument we used. Here, we actually took property off of the tax rolls. I'll stop, Janice, thank you. Yeah. You want to give questions?
Yeah. I'm going to open this up to questions for either of our speakers. I can give you the mic. Does anybody have anything they would like to ask?
The Lawrence Chamber of Commerce gets $400,000 plus each year from the city and county. There is no accounting for how that money is spent. There are two former mayors on the staff of the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. I'll bet I would have better luck getting the phone number of Vladimir Putin's mistress than I would at getting a look at the books of the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. There's $400,000 of public money that doesn't get accounted for. And is that money being spent to attract businesses and sell them on the idea that they can get tax abatements?
My answer to your question, more of a statement than a question. We make an accounting to the city and the county every year. And I think it's out on their website. And we have what's called the JEDC, the Joint Economic Development Committee, which is public members as well as the ED partners, economic partners meaning the city, the county, the chamber, and the university. We make an accounting of that every year. You can get that. If you need me to guide you to it, I will do that, but we do make an accounting. We also have those quarterly meetings with the JEDC. They know what's going on with the chamber. It's not hidden. It doesn't need to be, because the money is being spent for business attraction. And right now, we're spending a more proportionate amount of that for business expansion and retention, because again, I told you we shifted our model to do that. Now, another important piece to that is that we get $200,000 from the city and $200,000 from the county, and the EDC investors, which are businesses and individuals here in Douglas County, are giving us about $250,000 a year. In addition to the $200,000. So our budget is about, for economic development, with using public and private money, is about $600,000, $650,000. But once again, we have to make an accounting of that to the city and the county, and they don't just automatically every year agree to give us that again. We have to show we're doing it. I think 2015 will be a great example of what can be done. With not only business attraction, but expansion. We're working on the metrics right now to report out to our investors on December the 2nd how we spent our money this year. Their money, again, about $250,000 is coming from those EDC investors. We'll report out to them, and then I'm on the agenda for the city and the county before the 12th of December to give a report to the city and to the county of what we've done in the last year. So if the impression is that we are not being accountable for that money, I would disagree and say that we do everything they ask us to do and more, because it's important to change the thought, to change the perception of the Chamber of Commerce that the people in this town need to see a more transparent organization. We're doing everything we can to be transparent on that. We value that money, but if you look at what we're doing, our budget is minuscule compared to places like Johnson County and Topeka that have sales tax monies in order to run economic development.
I want to follow up with that, if I may, and just very briefly. I've asked both the city and the county for an accounting of how the Chamber of Commerce spends their money. And in both instances, I was told to go take a hike because there is no transparency, because we don't have a city commission or a PERB that is qualified to do economic development. And that is just a fact.
I think we can agree to disagree on that one.
This is for you, Larry. One of the criticisms of recruiting companies by offering tax incentives is that they stay for a period of time, say 10 years of the tax incentive, and then they move on to the next community that are offering incentives. How do you, in recruiting companies, are you looking at that from where these people come from and say, what did they get to settle there? And how much does that go in your decision-making before offering them anything to come here?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do. Again, we are relying more heavily than ever before. See, the model of economic development has changed a lot in the last 3 to 5 years. And the Chamber of Commerce in Lawrence has changed in the last 18 months dramatically. Rather than me and my staff going to a hotel in Chicago or LA and inviting people in or making trips, we run up a big bill with the hotel and food, all those kind of things. We are relying more on the Kansas City Area Development Council, which I told you was the top economic development engine in America, and the Kansas Department of Commerce, which is no slouch either. They're good at what they do. So they vet these companies for us as best they can to make sure economically they're solid. But then in the courting that goes on, I want to make it really clear that incentives are not laying out on the table like candy. The but-for test does come into play with them, and the only thing we tell them is that don't be making any public announcements if you want incentives until you've talked to the Kansas Department of Commerce for the state incentives that they have. And then it's also important for the City Commission to know right up front that we're looking at an abatement, a request. That's an important thing. It's a request. It's not, again, it's not candy. It's not something they could get. But the answer to your question is yes, that is important to us, because I think Alan is right that clawbacks are in all of the performance agreements, probably historically, and he may know even better than I do on that, but as a business person, I haven't heard a lot of clawbacks, but I also think that most of the companies that receive money are still here, a higher percentage than those that have left. I might say that it's important for us. We don't support retail incentives. The chamber was not involved in the apartment complex over on Mississippi Street, and we wouldn't be. That's not some, I mean, again, they're competing against all the other apartment owners in the city. We get that. Again, I've been on the other side of it, and I wouldn't want my competition to get more than I got. But we didn't take a position on the Eldridge. We support the Eldridge and what they're doing, but again, we're careful what we get into. We're very interested in primary jobs, which again is not minimum wage jobs by any means. They're above the living wage threshold, usually by quite a bit. But we're interested in money, new money coming into the community if they're going to come in from outside. But what would even be better would be if businesses on the inside would grow with people that are already here. They bring new people in to live in the community. One of the things the Chamber is off into right now that's important is affordable housing. We can't continue to keep recruiting companies that pay $12 to $15 an hour and expect people to be able to live here. So we're working with about 10 different organizations trying to figure out how to make that happen. It's been on the table for many years. A lot of people have wanted it for years and it hadn't happened. So we're into that. That's a long answer to your question, but there's a lot of things going on, a lot of things at play, and we're doing the best we can to make it attractive for not only people to work, but people to live. I mean, we'd like those people to live here with us too and not rely on a commuter workforce. So.